So today we'll speak mostly about about the 5th and the 6th Chabad Rebbes, mostly about the 6th EkatErina, and he's really the hero of today's talk. And just to say you briefly what happens to Chabad. So when the First World War begins and until the interwar period, basically, that at the 1915 at the Shalom Dover, the 5th Lubavitch Rebbe, Chabad Rebbe, he moves from Lubavitch to Rostov. So then he dies there in 1920, and his son in the early 20s, he goes to Leningrad, which is also pretty far, but also outside of their really sphere of his followers. And then in 1927, he's forced to leave the Soviet Union, so he goes from Leningrad to Riga. And then in the mid-30s, he goes from Riga to Warsaw. So you see, it's quite a journey. So and most of this journey is beyond the area where their followers, the Chabad followers, the Chabad Hasidim, live. Because we have in Leningrad, he really succeeded to build a really vibrant community, and also in Rostov after that. But still, historically, it's not the Hasidic centers. Also, Riga is Hasidic less, but still. And we should remember that. So after the First World War, what previously was Russian Empire, all this region where he travels, where his family travels, so it basically it became new states with their own borders. So borders it became to be a problem. So he needs to cross a border a few times when going from St. Petersburg, from Leningrad to Riga and then to Warsaw. So it's quite a difficult thing, and it is difficult for him, but it is even more difficult for his Hasidim. So basically what happens in the interwar period, that the traditional ways the Hasidim had of connecting to the Rebbe, they are no longer effective or no longer so effective. So basically what the options were. Options were that, so first of all you visit the Tzaddik's court. So you can go there for a while and participate in the activities there. Or if you're a more simple person, you go there just for a short visit to handle, for example, a kvittel to the Rebbe, and to say then so the kvittel usually contain the name and name, matrimony, and so basically the request, why did you come? So that's the physical presence at court, or you could pay at the ma'amat, tax to the tzaddik, to the Rebbe, and there were also some other things that more typical for Chabad. For example, there were people who traveled from the community to the community and recited the drashot, the recent drashot by the Rebbe. So anyway, all these traditional ways of connecting to the movement and connecting to the Rebbe, they are no longer effective. So because first of all, we have new borders. Second, we have, even before the First World War, we have active migration. And many people go to the United States, people go to Palestine, people go to Europe, not so much, but not so many, but still. And for those people in the United States, it's really difficult and expensive to go back to Europe to see the Rebbe. So especially after the establishment of the Soviet Union, and after at 1927 when he leaves for Riga, basically the major part of his Hasidim remain in Soviet Union, which is really strict about people crossing the border. So Soviet Union doesn't really want people to live. And so he really needs to invent a new way of connecting to his followers. Because he was a smart person, so he understood that a rebbe without Hasidim is not a rebbe anymore. So he invents the new ways of building this solidarity, and there are quite many of them. So he plays on, for example, this nostalgia for Lubavitch and for the traditional life, and so on and so forth. But one of the ways he uses is correspondence, is letters, and he really turns them into a major channel of communication between the Rebbe and between the regular rank and file Hasidim. So, and we can see it in the just in the amounts of letters published, because as everyone knows, Chabad is great at documenting itself. So they publish a lot. The question is what exactly they consider important to publish and when they don't want to publish because they don't want anyone to see it or because they don't consider it important. But it's a different issue. But we see it just in the amounts. The founder of Yosef Yitzhak, he had 6 volumes of letters. Yosef Yitzhak had 17 volumes of letters, which is 3 times more. And the last Rebbe had 33 volumes of letters published, which is a huge amount. And it's not only the issue of kind of that more letters survived, or that it was easier to write the letters technically because you have a typewriter and you don't write it by hand. But it's very important, so to say, ideological issue of building a connection. So obviously correspondence is the idea wasn't new. So because there are always correspondence between the Rebbe and some of the Hasidim, but usually it is limited to really either wealthy people or kind of close followers, kind of confidants of the Rebbe. So it's understandable they donate money, so you need to be in contact with them, in constant contact. And for the confidence, it's also kind of these are the people through whom you could influence the situation, so influence what happens in the court and in other communities. But the revolution that really the Yosef Yitzhak does is that he is really engaged in the correspondence with the regular followers and in really involved and really affectious correspondence. And so how do we know about that? There is the archive of Yosef Yitzhak Schneerson, which is now preserved in the Russian State Military Archive in Moscow. And it has quite a fascinating story because when in 1940 Yosef Yitzhak fled from Poland, so he left his archive and his library behind. Obviously it wasn't the time to grab all this stuff to the United States. And it was, so later in the end of the war, it was looted by the Red Army and brought to Moscow. And honestly, I have no idea why. I don't think that they were kind of particularly interested in his archive, but they just took everything they saw just in case, so it would, be somewhere in Moscow. So that's how it ended up in the military archive. And the interesting thing is, so when speaking about what Chabad publishes and what Chabad doesn't publish, only small part of this kind of regular correspondence is published in these 17 volumes of his letters. Because mostly, not because Chabad wants to keep it secret, but because they just don't find it interesting. Because it's really kind of letters. There is no religious content there. There's no kind of religious innovation, hidush there or something. So they're just not interesting for them. And so in the archive we have, first of all, the original incoming mail, which is mostly isn't published. And we also have the summaries or the extracts from the incoming mail, which was made by his secretaries to kind of to facilitate responding. And also we have a lot of EkatErina responses, which also allow us to reconstruct the contents of the initial request. And so basically I'm claiming that letters partially came to substitute the quitlet, and not only they came to substitute the quitlet, but they also offered much broader opportunities. Because first of all, letters could cross borders much more easier than people, and so traveling of the letters costed much less. Second, so letters had no length limit, because when you come to the Rebbe, you usually have, well, a short period of time. You don't have the whole day to tell about your problems and about your life. And in the letter you can write, I mean, it can be any long as you want it to be. Also, the visit to the Rebbe is quite stressful, because it's really kind of really an important holy person. So people are usually feel stressed and excited about that, and there are kind of a lot of stories that people say that, well, I came into this room where the Rebbe was and I couldn't utter a word because I was so stressed that I didn't really know what to say and where to start. Also, letters make this connection very personal, because letter is addressed to the Rebbe, although I guess people understood that they're secretaries and there was this whole kind of apparatus, but still it's addressed directly to the Rebbe, and the response is addressed directly to the person, which is also important because from this perspective, letter begins to be not only the content, not only the text, but the material letter itself, which begins to serve as a sort of relic. So a short summary what people wanted, so kind of the practical requests that people want, that people asked. So we have almost a third of. So for this I talked about 310 letters. There are more, but I think that these are quite representative. So about a third of them deals with health issues, which is quite usual and normal in the quitlet. We see almost the same, that kind of health is really the most prominent topic. Another almost third deals with job and earnings and kind of blessing or advice on this topic. And those are, so in this case, those are mostly from the Soviet Union, but not exclusively. So also we have about 15%, so questions related to marriage. So 11% of questions, so again, blessing and advice related to relocation, and this is almost exclusively the Soviet Union. But also, which is important, that people often not only ask for the advice or the blessing, but they also seek moral support from the Rebbe. And the Rebbe himself, EkatErina, he really encouraged people to write, which is amazing, because he apparently considered it an essential part of his kind of job as a Rebbe, and he really encouraged his followers to write him, and it doesn't matter in which language, so in Yiddish and Hebrew. So his son-in-law, Menachem Mendel, the last Rebbe, he kind of did the same. It doesn't matter whether it's Hebrew, Yiddish, English, whatever. So he really encouraged the writing, because here you see that he says to the person that, well, you wrote me the letter, I got it, but you didn't go into details. So I understand that you were in Leningrad, but I didn't understand what's going on, how you're doing, how your family is doing, how are the things? I want to know the details. And he says that, he writes that, please describe me in such a way so I would see it as if I were there on the spot. And or another thing where he says that that I would like to receive more letters from you. I would like kind of to know more often, write me more often. And it's really amazing because these are really kind of rank and file people. So imagine like you're writing to the king, and the king says to you, please write more, I want to know more details about your life. and I guess it was really, really empowering for the people, and it really encouraged them to kind of to establish this psychological, I don't know, individual,
it's a bit
personal.
Because if you see in the last two sentences,
Yeah.
I've got also a letter for your father, but I don't have his address, so please deliver my letter to your father.
That's exactly, that's another point I will address, because it's amazing how much he and his kind of his secretaries invested in this, because so probably for some people he did remember whose father and whose relative and who wrote him I don't know, a month ago, a year ago, but it really needed a conscious effort of thinking about it, of organizing this material, of saying to the secretary that, hey, I want to know whether this person wrote to me, I don't know, half a year ago, 2 years ago. And he also wanted for the follow-ups. So like if there was a problem or kind of something the person asked advice for, so he wanted a follow-up. So here, for example, he asks about the person's son. So how the things are going? So there was apparently some discussion about that, and so he gave his advice. He gave his advice. He's asking how the things are going, which is also it requires a lot of effort. I mean, you could remember it about your friends, but he got a lot of mail. He got a lot of Hasidim. So he really needed to invest in that. And here we also, it's an interesting thing because it's an extract of the letter, and here we also see how this kind of secretary apparatus worked, because here we see the beginning of the letter that the person got the letter, but then we have in some brackets we have the commentary of the secretary. That in the last letter, so what the Rebbe responded was that his wife need to go for the delivery, for the birth, to her parents' place, to her parents' town, kind of to remind the Rebbe what the discussion was about. And here is also a really interesting thing that so the thing is that the Rebbe advised so for the person's wife to go and to give birth at the parents' town, but the person he doesn't really agree with that, and he gives all kinds of arguments. For example, well, we live in a big city, and so her parents live in a small town. She has a severe medical condition, and the doctors really don't advise for her to go, and so on, and many other reasons. And so he kind of very politely brings the Rebbe to the answer he wants to get. And in the end, he's saying kind of, well, so after I told so all these details, all these arguments, what are your opinions? So what should I do? And it's really amazing how this process of interaction between the response of the Rebbe and the reaction of the person on it. And also when a person didn't write for a while, so he would mention that the Rebbe Yosef Yitzchak would mention that, and he would say that, for example, that, well, I was very happy to get this letter, so because you didn't write for a while, or if the person wrote the letter but didn't mention some details, he would say, well, I got the letter, but why are you not telling about your studies, about your Torah studies? What are you doing there? So it's really quite a conscious system, a conscious attempt to establish this contact. And so people also perceive these letters not only as a source of blessing or the source of advice, but also the source of moral support. And here, for example, in the end, you can see that here the last two lines, that the person writes that, well, we could really use your support, and if you write a letter of kind of encouragement, that would really help, that would really raise our spirits. And EkatErina so himself saw it apparently as one of his responsibilities, one of his functions. So when he felt that the person was kind of feeling down or feeling depressed by the situation, by life events, so he would say that, well, I see from your letter, I see that you're feeling down. So, and he tried to really to offer this support to the extent he could to the person. And so, well, the question is whether he really was sincere in his interest in the details of Chassidim lives. So I think that, so partially he was, so because his personal correspondence shows that he felt a lot of responsibility so over his Hasidim, and especially the ones in the Soviet Union, and he really tried to help them, so both in the kind of the financial ways and in the different other ways. So he really felt responsible. So obviously we can't know whether he was kind of really interested in all these people or only in some of them, but basically it isn't important, because his idea worked, and it's amazing how it worked. And we see it, and it worked even more in the times of the last Rebbe, and we see it also from the stories that, so nowadays Chabad Hasidim tell that, so there is such a legend that the last Rebbe, he always answered the letters himself. So it was kind of, it wasn't the secretary who did it, it wasn't some, I don't know, assistant who did it. He did it himself. He read the letters himself, and he answered himself. Then the secretary did the typewriting, but it was his words. And even when he didn't feel well and so on, he felt that it was his responsibility to answer kind of personally. And the question I'm really kind of struggling with, because I'm not the researcher of the Hasidism, and probably you could help me with that and give some insights, what happens in other Hasidisms. Because in the interwar period, it's a common problem. So this kind of establishment of the contact. The Polish rabbis, they're kind of in more beneficial situation, but still, they're also many of them are relocated and so on. So I really wonder how it works in other Hasidism, because I believe that this way is really unique to Chabad, at least as far as I know, at least to this extent. So, thank you.
It was very interesting, and I think that it's characterized Chabad from its first days. Because when Rabbi Menachem Mendel Milvitebsk left Europe to Israel, the way to be in contact with the Hasidim was letter. And
That's true.
I think it's typical to Chabad for the beginning. Because other tzaddikim were in contact by a physical way. And Chabad, because of the geographical distance, that was a way. So maybe it's tradition in Chabad.
I think that you're partially right, but the thing is that with the Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, it didn't work out.
Yes.
So in the end, Rebbe Shneur Zalman, the Zalman would take the place and fulfill the job.
But as I know from Immanuel Ecke's researchers, Chabad built a new system of being contact by guiding from distance. And
yeah, that's true, but still this kind of the letter thing, I think it's quite modern, because it's also, so Yosef Iskak is in correspondence with really simple people.
Yeah.
So because in the late 18th century, early 19th century, you can be in correspondence with the educated people, but not with the, mostly not with the rank and file. So, so I'm not saying that it's, I think that the idea really of building this long distance relationship, it was present in Chabad. But in the interwar period, it really kind of, there was an evolution of this idea, and they used letters as one of the means for that. Yeah.
In terms of what you know, how much censorship was there from the Stalinist regime? You know, because in general, it wasn't free flow, okay, but you have a unique system where you have tremendous amount of following and an apparatus to be in contact. So it's kind of startling that all this went pretty easily. And a question not related to your talk, to the issue though. What happened to the libraries? If the guy moves around...
Oh, I can tell you a lot of that because so in Moscow I worked in the Schneerson library, so I...
No, but before Schneerson, okay, so...
In Warsaw I can tell you also.
Well, no, but what was...
Library is my thing.
Were most of the books preserved, or in the end were they lost?
Okay. So, concerning the censorship, it's an important issue. I'm not really sure how it worked in the mid-30s. So mostly we have, I haven't really checked it, but mostly we have the letters from 1927 to 1933, 34. So it's kind of before it's after, it's in the Stalin time, but it's not in the time of Great Terror. Yeah. So I believe that in the late 20s, the censorship was pretty okay with these letters. So unless they wrote about the illegal yeshivot or this kind of stuff, because for this they used the deciphered letters, and it's also amazing because so first time you see it, you just don't realize what's going on, what is written in this text. So they used to write the ciphered letters, and then to decipher them in Riga or so then in Warsaw. But about the regular things, I believe that it was kind of really really okay. And library, so actually he wasn't lucky with the libraries because the first one was so they left it. So when they left Lubavitch, they sent the library to Moscow, and in Moscow it was nationalized in the beginning of 1920s, and OlShevich really tried to gain it back unsuccessfully, and then he bought the library from kind of renowned a bibliophile, Samuel Wiener, and he took it, so this library he succeeded to take out from the Soviet Union to Riga and then to Warsaw, and then, so he left it in Warsaw in 1940, so, and then it was, a big part of it was returned to Chabad in 1977, if I'm not mistaken, so they found it in state library or in some kind of, in some library in Warsaw, I think. And they regained it. Yeah.
I'm wondering what you think about the genre of these letters. Clearly, they were meant from the beginning to be not only seen by the recipient, but by a much wider audience of Hasidim. So I think, it's, obviously we're not going all the way to a epistolary form masquerading as letters. There really are letters to individuals, yet they're also letters for public consumption. I'm wondering, are they maybe the counterpart of She'elot v'Tshuvot in a traditional rabbinic society? I mean, I'm just wondering, generically, how would you see these letters?
I think it did influence. I mean, I'm not sure that it really was meant to be read by the white public. So probably he could have expected that the person would show the letter to his friend or, I don't know, his family. So this kind of circle, I mean, not to discuss it with the community. So I believe that it was meant to be kind of relatively personal, but he did build the whole thing in a really conscious way. So it wasn't just so creative writing. So he really like consciously built kind of each step of this, each part of this letter.
Published, I mean, it's the most recent already,
Which is
published
different.
33 volumes.
Yeah.
That indicates quite a lot of intent, and I'm wondering if these do we know anything about the editorial process? Were certain letters included or not included, depending on
in the publications, in the volumes?
Yeah.
It's so it's also an interesting story, because so when you speak to Chabad, they say we publish everything. We're super open. We publish everything. Then when you say, well, but you have this kind of personal correspondences with the people, can I see it? Say no. So it's they really, I mean, they publish first of all the things that they find interesting, and secondly the things that they don't see as potentially harmful either for the person's reputation or for their reputation. So because in some cases they would publish kind of a part of the letter and omit so some parts of it which they find kind of describe conflicts, for example, or which describe some, I don't know, so discontent with the Rebbe's behavior or with something else. So they prefer not to take out this kind of thing. So the publications are really kind of really edited, but still they publish much more than any Hasidism ever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you quickly on that point? The series of volumes, are they all published after? Are they published after each? Because actually that would then change following
Actually, I haven't checked it with the last Rebbe. The
last Rebbe was done regularly.
Okay.
But before that, I know from the previous one, from Tzemach Tzedek.
Yeah, they published it afterwards.
Yeah, it's done afterwards.
No, and also Yosef Yitzchak.
Yeah.
And also Yosef Yitzchak, they began to publish it in
So it's not published
1982.
on the spot at the same time. It's usually one or two decades later.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, but Yosef Yitzchak definitely. So if you say about the last Rebbe, so.
I just wonder to what extent were the questions specifically referring to halakhic matters. And the reason I'm asking is that there is now a PhD dissertation about digital correspondence between Hasidim and Tzaddikim. And over there, many of the questions are specifically halakhic questions. So I wonder whether that was already part of the traditional matters.
There were a bit of them, but not so many. I mean, there is a certain group of the letters, also so quite a big one, on different religious issues, like different kind of interpretations of the verses, of, I don't know, of Talmud, citations and so on. But concerning halacha, I haven't really seen a lot of them.
But like if a person writes about health,
it's usually.
How does the halakha do that?
No.
They don't.
No. They say that.
Because in the digital correspondence they do.
No, but
Much more.
No. They say they write it like that. Like so, my wife is sick. She has a certain problem. We went to the doctors. The doctors made kind of tests, and they advised to make an operation. Whether we should do it or not, or something like that.
That's usually the case, but it depends, if I may truth, on who was the Rebbe.
I mean in the Chabad. So I mean in the Chabad.
Within the Chabad Admors, if you talk about the one that I deal with, the Tzemach Tzedek, he was supposed to be a halakhic authority. So
But I guess it's
some
from
of the
different
questions they
letters.
ask him are the one that you referred to. most of the Chabadic leaders, they dealt more with practical issues, less than halachic theory questions, etc., etc. And this is one of the differences between Hasidim and let's say Lithuanian, which is a totally different one, because, and it's also the way, some of the different ways that the yeshiva of the Hasidim, which emerged in the beginning of the 19th century, the 20th century, sorry, it was different from the Lithuanian yeshiva, meaning it was less theoretical, more practical, and so the way you act towards the rabbi, you don't look at him as an halachic figure. You look at him as your advisor, your mentor, the one that should help you. And this is, and I think that what Ronnie talked about, you were right, because there is a basic difference between Chabad from the very beginning. Let's say from the one following Schnellzahn, not the one that made it up. In all or in most Hasidic groups, you go to the Rebbe.
Yeah, in Chabad,
you go to the Rebbe.
They say,
you
don't
go to ask, you ask him, and you go to the teacher, and you go to or whatever it is. In Chabad, from the very beginning, he goes to you. So he wants to be in constant touch with you, not only when the Shabbat, the Friday dinner occurs, but all the time. So this is a different way, and it's unique to Chabad. You asked before if I know about, if we know about others. I think you should talk to Gershon Bakon. Okay. Gershon Bakon is investigating the Alexander Hasidism, which is totally different.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe that it's kind of really a Chabad thing.
And he knows a lot on other Hasidic groups.
Stuff about
but I mean, that's not in the Interwar period.
The one
that
in certain times is resembling Chabad, but only in certain times is the girl, the Go Hasidim.
Yeah, that's why they competed.
Here in the case, it depends who is the more. If he wants to go out and it's slack, or he wants you to come to church.
I would like to ask about the gender aspect of the writers, of the letters.
There were women, not so many of them, but there were women. I mean, so it was also kind of, it was allowed, I guess, so in general, so there are Hasidisms where women can't come to the Rebbe and can't to hand in the Kmitla. In Chabad it was allowed, I mean, in general. So women also wrote the letters, and it's really interesting that sometimes you see women writing in Hebrew, and so Yosef Yitzchak writing in Yiddish story, and Yosef Yitzchak responding in Yiddish. But you also see quite educated women who write in Hebrew and who say that, well, I was in Lubavitch, I don't know, in 1913, and I learned so and so. So I studied Torah or I studied something. And now in the Soviet Union it's difficult, and I want your guidance, what should I do, and so on. So sometimes it was also the case.
So they published the names of the people, or they?
When they, in most cases, yes. If there is nothing, I mean, nothing private, nothing painful. So usually they do publish.
Well, as a scholar of modern time Hasidism, I find it imperative to distinguish between looking at Hasidism as a religious movement, but also as a social movement. There are two levels of the same thing. And with that context in mind, I think that the main issue regarding the topics that you have raised is what is the meaning of the concept of community? What is a community? And also, how do you maintain a community? And once you have like the old-style community where you have a rebbe and you have a court and people come to the court, then there was one way how you conserve the society, the Hasidic society, around this type of community. Later on, when other like secondary codes began to exist, and then you have a different policy on how to conserve it. Like, for example, sending a son or a son-in-law, and he would be very representative and things like that. And then later on, we have like community abroad, and you have a different type of management, how to preserve the community. And that the system of the data, especially with Chabad, that proved to be a very efficient way of maintaining a virtual community, basically, which does not have like a common geographical aspects and people are, but still you maintain that community via correspondence. So it's important to think about that as well. In that in mind, we can also understand also the large number of letters in the last Lubavitcher Rebbe's correspondence, because Chabad obviously realized that he was going to be the last one in the lineage, and nobody was going to replace him. So they needed to prepare in advance, a large enough body of correspondence of content that people would be able to use after he was no longer available for everyday consultation. What we actually see today, and those letters are used as if they are happening today, and you would use all kinds of methods to get a response from the Rebbe, even though he's not present in flesh and blood, but he's somewhere living in those letters. So this in the background, there's some logic to this whole operation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not that it happens like occasionally. They really they are building this kind of thing, and you're completely right about the social part of the community. That basically, the religious part is also important, but what they're trying to build, especially when the Rebbe is so far away, and he has a part of his Hasidim in the United States, he has a part of them in Poland, he has a part of them in the Soviet Union. That's exactly what they try to build, this kind of virtual community, kind of imagined, not in the Anderson's meaning, but still kind of this virtual community. And they eventually succeed, which is amazing.
On the side of that, we should also remember that no such organization can exist without a stable economical system. So this whole thing, without speaking about it, this also supports the cash flow.
That's true, but
so
still,
we are not allowed to speak about it.
No, you're right. But in the interwar period, Chabad was relatively poor.
Yeah.
So when you look at for example, the documents from the Tomchit Mitzvah, they constantly saying that we are closing next month because we don't have any money. We have a lot of debts. We have just the teachers say that no, we are going away because you are not paying our salaries, and it's we're really kind of in a difficult place.
And then they're sending those letters to America, and they're trying to raise money there. So
but also the question of success.
I'm not saying that they always succeeded, but
no. It was the consideration. Absolutely, it was also the consideration.
Okay, just one point about censorship. It's much easier to do censorship when you write in Yiddish. It's much more difficult to do it when you write in Hebrew.
Why so?
Because people that could read the subtleties in Hebrew are very few within these censors. So basically, this is one of the reasons why earlier in the time of the Russian Empire, there was censorship on Jewish newspapers, which were rare, and almost none on Hebrew. So you could see much more newspapers in Hebrew than in Yiddish. So the way how do you respond to letters or newspapers in Hebrew makes it a bit